Hello anatomy students, this is Dr. Alice. In this short video, I'm going to review with you the names of the layers of the skin as well as the different types of tissue that are found in each layer. When we talk about the skin, the fancy way to refer to it is the integumentary system. The integumentary system, or the integument, has three main layers to it. The outermost layer of the skin is called the epidermis. The beginning part epi means above. So the epidermis is the layer that is above the layer known as the dermis. And below the layer known as the dermis is something called the hypodermis. Hypo means below. So we have the epidermis that is above the dermis itself, and that layer below it called the hypodermis. Recall from lab that when we talk about the dermis layer of the skin, there's actually two parts to this layer. The upper part, known as the papillary layer of the dermis, and the much larger lower part known as the reticular layer of the dermis. In each of these parts of the skin, there are different kinds of tissue. So let's look at some pictures of these types of tissues and talk about where they're found. I want to start with the layer called the hypodermis. The hypodermis is that lowest layer of the skin. In the hypodermis, we find adipose loose connective tissue. This image shows me adipose loose connective tissue with the large cells known as adipocytes. Remember that fat cells, or adipocytes, look like they're empty on slides. This is the place where lipids would be stored inside those cells if this tissue was still alive. So the hypodermis layer of the skin, the location of adipose loose connective tissue. Remember, this was the deepest layer, or the lowest layer in the skin. Let's go up to the region known as the papillary layer of the dermis. This is the upper part of the dermis that forms things called papillae that look like fingers reaching up toward the epidermis. The papillary layer of the dermis is made of a type of tissue known as areolar loose connective tissue. Areolar loose connective tissue has several dark cells known as fibroblasts that are surrounded by a variety of different kinds of protein fibers. We can see them in purple and in pink. Areolar loose connective tissue has fewer large proteins in it than the kind of tissue that I find in the reticular layer of the dermis, known as dense regular connective tissue. Most of the dermis, which is the reticular layer of the dermis, is made of dense, regular connective tissue. That kind of tissue gets its name because the proteins are densely packed. All of these pink things that I see are that mess that is dense, irregular connective tissue. These pink collagen proteins are going the same direction as the screen. Some of them are pointing out of the screen. Some of them are going into the screen at an angle. Dense, irregular connective tissue has these irregularly arranged collagen proteins going in all different directions in this tissue. And again, dense, irregular connective tissue is found in the reticular layer of the dermis. The outermost layer of the skin is called the epidermis. Remember that epi means above. And when we talk about the epidermis layer of the skin, we have what's called keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium. Keratinized means these cells are full of keratin. I can tell that because in this outermost layer of the skin, I see cells that are actively falling off. In fact, you can blame this layer or this type of tissue for a lot of the dust that you see in your house. It's cells that have fallen off because they're completely full of keratin. Keratinized epithelium, the cells are full of keratin. Stratified, I have more than one layer of cells. In fact, we can see many, many layers in this image. Squamous, My cells are flat and skinny. If I look up close at them here on the top layer, the apical surface, these cells are squished flat. Keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium, the final kind of tissue found in the skin, found in the outermost layer known as the epidermis.